The Thompson submachine gun is an American submachine gun, invented by John T. Thompson in 1918, that became infamous during the Prohibition era. It was a common sight in the media of the time, being used by both law enforcement officers and criminals. The Thompson submachine gun was also known informally as the Tommy gun, trench broom, trench sweeper, Chicago typewriter, Chicago piano, Chicago style, Chicago organ grinder, the chopper, and simply the Thompson. The Thompson was favored by soldiers, criminals, police, and civilians alike for its large, 45 ACP cartridge accuracy, and high volume of automatic fire. It has since gained popularity among civilian collectors for its historical significance. It has had, and continues to have, considerable significance in popular culture, especially in works about the U.S.'s Prohibition era and World War II, and hence is among the best-known firearms in recent history. History and service. Development. The Thompson submachine gun was developed by General John T. Thompson, who originally envisioned an auto rifle to replace the bolt-action service rifles then in use. While searching for a way to allow such a weapon to operate safely without the complexity of a recoil or gas-operated mechanism, Thompson came across a patent issued to John Bell Blish in 1915 based on adhesion of inclined metal surfaces under pressure. Thompson found a financial backer, Thomas F. Ryan, and started the Auto Ordnance Company in 1916 for the purpose of developing his auto rifle. It was primarily developed in Cleveland, Ohio. The principal designers were Theodore H. Eichhoff, Oscar V. Payne, and George E. Gall. By late 1917, the limits of the Blish principle were discovered. Rather than working as a locked breech, it functioned as a friction-delayed blowback action. It was found that the only cartridge currently in U.S. service suitable for use with the lock was the .45 ACP round. Thompson then envisioned a one-man handheld machine gun in .45 ACP as a trench broom for use in the ongoing trench warfare of World War I. Payne designed the gun itself and its stick and drum magazines. The project was then titled Annihilator, and by 1918, most of the design issues had been resolved. However, the war ended 2 days before prototypes could be shipped to Europe. At an Auto Ordnance Board meeting in 1919 to discuss the marketing of the Annihilator, with the war now over, the weapon was officially renamed the Thompson submachine gun, while other weapons had been developed shortly prior with similar objectives in mind. The Thompson was the first weapon to be labeled and marketed as a submachine gun. Thompson intended the weapon as an automatic trench broom to sweep enemy troops from the trenches, filling a role for which the Browning automatic rifle had been proven ill-suited. This concept had already been developed by German troops using their own Bergmann MP-18, the world's first submachine gun, in concert with Sturmtruppen tactics. Early use. The Thompson first entered production as the M1921. It was available to civilians. Although poor sales resulted from the expense of the weapon, the Thompson gun, with one Type 20 shot stick magazine, was priced at $200 in 1921. M1921 Thompsons were sold in small quantities to the United States Postal Inspection Service and to the United States Marine Corps. Federal sales were followed by sales to several police departments in the U.S. and minor international sales to various armies and constabulary forces, chiefly in Central and South America. The Marines used the Thompsons in the Banana Wars and in China. It was popular with the Marines as a point defense weapon for countering ambush by Nicaraguan guerrillas, and led to the organization of 4-man fire teams with as much firepower as a 9-man rifle squad. The major complaints against the Thompson were its weight, inaccuracy at ranges over 50 yards, and the lack of penetrating power of the .45 ACP pistol cartridge. Some of the first batches of Thompsons were bought in America by agents of the Irish Republic, notably Harry Boland. The first test of a Thompson in Ireland was performed by West Cork Brigade Commander Tom Barry in presence of IRA leader Michael Collins. A total of 653 were purchased, but 495 were seized by U.S. Customs authorities in New York in June 1921. The remainder made the way to the Irish Republican Army by way of Liverpool and were used in the last month of the Irish War of Independence. After a truce with the British in July 1921, the IRA imported more Thompsons and they were used in the subsequent Irish Civil War. They were not found to be very effective in Ireland. In only 32% of actions where it was used did the Thompson cause serious casualties to those attacked. The Thompson achieved most of its early notoriety in the hands of Prohibition and Depression-era gangsters, motorized bandits and the lawmen who pursued them, and in Hollywood films about their exploits, most notably in the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. It has been referred to by one researcher as the gun that made the 20s raw. In 1926, the cuts compensator was offered as an option for the M1921 Thompsons, with the compensator were catalogued as No. 21 AC at the original price of $200, with the plain M1921 designated No. 21A at a reduced price of $175. In 1928, federal laboratories took over distribution of the weapon from Thompson's Auto Ordnance Corporation. The cost at this time was $225 per weapon, with $5 per 50-round drum and $3 for a 20-round magazine. Nationalist China acquired a quantity for use against Japanese land forces, and eventually began producing copies of the Thompson in small quantities for use by its armies and militias. In the 1930s, Taiyuan Arsenal produced copies of the Thompson for Yan Zishan, the warlord of Shanxi Province. The Federal Bureau of Investigation first acquired Thompsons in 1933 following the Kansas City Massacre. World War II. In 1938, the Thompson submachine gun was adopted by the U.S. military, serving during World War II and beyond. There were two military types of Thompson SMG. The M1928A1 had provisions for box and drum magazines. It had a cuts compensator, cooling fins on the barrel, employed a delayed blowback action, and its charging handle was on the top of the receiver. The M1 and M1A1 had a barrel without cooling fins, a simplified rear sight, provisions only for box magazines, employed a straight blowback action, and the charging handle was on the side of the receiver. Over 1.5 million military Thompson submachine guns were produced during World War II. Magazine developments. Military users of the M1928A1 had complaints about the L50 round drum magazine. The British Army officially criticized their excessive weight, the rattling sound they made, and shipped thousands back to the U.S. in exchange for box magazines. The Thompson had to be cocked, bolt retracted, ready to fire, to attach the drum. It attached and detached by sliding sideways, which made magazine changes slow and also created difficulty in clearing a cartridge malfunction. Reloading an empty drum with cartridges was an involved process. In contrast, the XX 20-round box magazine was light and compact. It tended not to rattle, and could be inserted with the bolt safely closed. It was quickly attached and detached, and was removed downward, making clearing jams easier. The box tripped the bolt open lock when empty, facilitating magazine changes. An empty box was easily reloaded with loose rounds. However, users complained it was limited in capacity. In the field, some soldiers taped two XX magazines together in what would be known as jungle style to speed magazine changes. Two alternatives to the L drum and XX box magazines were tested December 6, 1941, at Fort Knox. An extended 30-round box magazine and a 40-round magazine made by welding two 20-round magazines face-to-face, jungle style. Testers considered both superior to either the XX box or L drum. The 30-round box was approved as standard in December 1941 to replace the XX and L magazines. M1 development. The staff of Savage Arms looked for ways to simplify the M1928A1, producing a prototype in February 1942 which was tested at Aberdeen Proving Ground in March 1942. Army Ordnance approved adoption as the M1 in April 1942. M1s were made by Savage Arms and by Auto Ordnance. M1s were issued with the 30-round box magazine and would accept the earlier 20-round box, but would not accept the drum magazine. Combat use. The Thompson was used in World War II in the hands of Allied troops as a weapon for scouts, non-commissioned officers, and patrol leaders, as well as commissioned officers, tank crewmen, and soldiers performing raids on German positions. In the European theatre, the gun was widely utilized in British and Canadian commando units, as well as in the U.S. Army paratrooper and ranger battalions, where it was issued more frequently than in line infantry units because of its high rate of fire and its stopping power, which made it very effective in the kinds of close combat these special operations troops were expected to undertake. Military police were fond of it, as were paratroopers, who borrowed Thompsons from members of the mortar squad for use on patrols behind enemy lines. The gun was prized by those lucky enough to get one and proved itself in the close street fighting that was encountered frequently during the invasion of France. A Swedish variant of the M1928A1, the Kulspruta pistol M40, served in the Swedish Army between 1940 and 1951. Through Lend-Lease, the Soviet Union also received the Thompson, but due to a shortage of appropriate ammunition, its use was not widespread. In the Malayan Campaign, the Burma Campaign and the Pacific Theater, Lend-Lease issue Thompsons were used by the British Army, Indian Army, Australian Army Infantry and other Commonwealth forces. They used the Thompson extensively in jungle patrols and ambushes, where it was prized for its firepower, though it was criticized for its hefty weight and poor reliability. Difficulties in supply eventually led to its replacement in Australian Army units in 1943 by other submachine guns such as the Owen Anniston. The Thompsons were then given to the Royal Australian Air Force and Royal Australian Navy. New Zealand Commando Forces initially used Thompsons but switched them for the more reliable, lighter, and more accurate Owen during the Solomon Islands and Guadalcanal campaigns. The U.S. Marines also used the Thompson as a limited-issue weapon, especially during the later island assaults. The Thompson was soon found to have limited effect in heavy jungle cover, where the low-velocity .45 bullet would not penetrate most small-diameter trees or protective armor vests. In the U.S. Army. Many Pacific War jungle patrols were originally equipped with Thompsons in the early phases of the New Guinea and Guadalcanal campaigns, but soon began employing the bar in its place as a point defense weapon. The Army introduced the U.S. M3 and M3A1 submachine guns in 1943 with plans to produce the latter in numbers sufficient to cancel future orders for the Thompson, while gradually withdrawing it from first-line service. However, due to unforeseen production delays and requests for modifications, the M3A1 never replaced the Thompson, and purchases continued until February 1944. At the end of World War II, the Thompson, with a total wartime production of over 1.5 million, outnumbered the M3A1 submachine guns in service by nearly 3 to 1. After World War II, Thompson submachine guns were used by both sides during the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Following the war, Thompsons were issued to members of Israel's elite Unit 101, upon the formation of that unit in 1953. During the Greek Civil War, the Thompson submachine gun was used by both sides. The Hellenic Armed Forces, gendarmerie and police units were equipped with Thompson submachine guns supplied by the British and later in the war by the United States. The opposing communist fighters of the Democratic Army of Greece were also using Thompson submachine guns, either captured from government forces or inherited from ELAS. ELAS was the strongest of the resistance forces during the period of Greek resistance against the Germans and Italians, and were supplied with arms from both the British and the United States. After the demobilization of ELAS, an unspecified number of arms were not surrendered to the government but kept hidden, and were later used by the Democratic Army of Greece. The Thompson also found service with the KNIL during their attempt to retake the former colony of Indonesia. Captured examples were later used by Indonesian forces against Dutch forces. By the time of the Korean War, the Thompson had seen much use by the U.S. and South Korean military, even though Thompson had been replaced as standard issue by the M3A1. With huge numbers of guns available in Army ordnance arsenals, the Thompson remained classed as limited standard or substitute standard long after the standardization of the M3A1. Many Thompsons were distributed to Chinese armed forces as military aid before the fall of Chiang Kai-shek's government to Mao Zedong's Communist forces in 1949 during the Chinese Civil War. During the Korean War, American troops were surprised to encounter Chinese Communist troops heavily armed with Thompsons, especially during surprise night assaults. The gun's ability to deliver large quantities of short-range automatic assault fire proved very useful in both defense and assault during the early part of the conflict. Many of these weapons were captured and placed into service with American soldiers and Marines for the balance of the war. During the Cuban Revolution, the Thompson submachine gun was used by some of Fidel Castro's guerrillas. During the Vietnam War, some South Vietnamese army units and defense militia were armed with Thompson submachine guns, and a few of these weapons were used by reconnaissance units, advisors, and other American troops. It was later replaced by the M16 assault rifle. Not only did some U.S. soldiers have use of them in Vietnam, but they encountered them as well. The Viet Cong liked the weapon, and used both captured models as well as manufacturing their own copies in small jungle workshops. The Australian government destroyed most of the Thompson machine carbines in the 1960s. They shipped the remaining stocks to arm the forces of Lon Nol's Khmer Republic in 1975. They were then captured and used by the Khmer Rouge. In the conflict in Northern Ireland, known as the Troubles, the Thompson was again used by the Irish Republican paramilitaries. According to historian Peter Hart, the Thompson remained a key part of both the official IRA and provisional IRA arsenals until well into the 1970s, when it was superseded by the Armorite and the AK-47. The Thompson was also used by U.S. and overseas law enforcement and police forces, most prominently by the FBI. The FBI used Thompsons until they were declared obsolete and ordered destroyed in the early 1970s. Collector interest. Because of the quality and craftsmanship, as well as the gangster era and World War II connections, Thompsons are sought as collector's items. There were fewer than 40 pre-production prototypes. The Colt Patent Firearms Manufacturing Company in Hartford, Connecticut was contracted by the Auto Ordnance Corporation to manufacture the initial mass production of 15,000 Thompson submachine guns in 1920. An original Colt Model 1921 AORAC, Model 1927 AORAC, Model 1928 Navy AORAC, properly registered in working condition with original components, can easily fetch from $25,000 to $45,000 plus, depending on condition and accessories. For World War II, approximately 1,700,000 Thompson submachine guns were produced by Auto Ordnance and Savage Arms, with 1,387,134 being the simplified World War II M1 and M1A1 variants. A Model 1921A believed to have been owned by Boney and Clyde, but without historical documentation to substantiate this provenance. Sold at auction on January 21, 2012 in Kansas City for $130,000. Features. Operating characteristics. Early versions of the Thompson, the model of 1919, had a fairly high cyclic rate of fire, as high as 1,200 rounds per minute, with most model of 1921 at 800 revolutions per minute. In 1927, the U.S. Navy ordered 500 Thompsons but requested a lower rate of fire. Thompson requested Payne develop a method of reducing the cyclic rate of fire. Payne replaced the actuator with the heavier one and the recoil spring with a stiffer one. The changes reduced the rate of fire from 800 to the 600 RPM of the U.S. Navy model of 1928. Later M1 and M1A1 Thompsons averaged also 600 revolutions per minute. This rate of fire, combined with the rather heavy trigger pull and a stock with an excessive drop, increases the tendency for the barrel to climb off target in automatic fire. Compared to modern 9mm submachine guns, the .45 Thompson is quite heavy, weighing roughly the same as the contemporary M1 Garand semi-automatic rifle, and requires lots of cleaning. This was one of the major complaints against the weapon made by service members of the U.S. Army issued the Thompson. Although the drum magazine provided significant firepower in military service, it was found to be overly heavy and bulky, especially when slung on patrol or on the march. The M1 Thompson drum magazine was rather fragile, and cartridges tended to rattle inside it, producing unwanted noise. For these reasons, the 20-round and later 30-round box magazines soon proved most popular with military users of the M192A1, and drum compatibility was not included in the design of the wartime M1 and M1A1 models. The Thompson was one of the earliest submachine guns to incorporate a double-column, double-feed box magazine design, which undoubtedly contributed to the gun's reputation for reliability. In addition, the gun performed better than most after exposure to rain, dirt, and mud. The selective fire. Thompson fires from the open bolt position, in which the bolt is held fully to rearward by the sear when cocked. When the trigger is depressed, the bolt is released, traveling forward to chamber, and simultaneously fire the first and subsequent rounds until either the trigger is released or the ammunition is exhausted. This eliminates the risk of cook-off, which can sometimes occur in closed-bolt automatic weapons. Disassembly. The Thompson submachine gun varies in field strip procedure, depending on the variant. World War II era M1 variants and RPB models field strip more easily than the M1921.